Right now as we speak, a cluster of brain cells in a petri dish in a lab in Australia is playing the video game Doom. The Australian tech company Cortical Labs has over 200,000 brain cells trapped in a petri dish, and they're training that artificial network to shoot demons, which, is one of the most tech company things you could ever do. You may have guessed that this isn't just a thing they're doing for fun. Cortical Labs is working on something they've coined biological computing, which is a kind of artificial intelligence that isn't all the way artificial. It's AI that's much more of a human eye. The device in question that started the whole thing off is called the CL1, and I'm going to make the easy assumption here that this stands for Cortical Labs 1 and not like Cantankerous Lemur, first of his name. So this is the device here, and this thing is a miniature living brain that can learn and be programmed, and here it is shooting demons like there's no tomorrow, or, trying to. It really can pretty much play Doom, but they have mentioned that it's still not very good at it. And I don't know if that means it might be one day, or if this is just sort of the best that we're gonna get. Running Doom in particular, for whatever reason, has long been like a weird nerdy fascination in the tech community. Ever since someone figured out how to run Doom on a calculator, for instance, we've wanted to run it on pretty much everything. There's even a subreddit totally dedicated to this that's called It Runs Doom, and people post the crazy things that they've done to get Doom to run in the strangest places. And this was part of Cortical Labs' stated motivations, because Pong is fine, but running Doom is the bizarre gold standard. So basically what they've done is they put these neurons on a dish and stuck it inside this hardware, which is kind of like a mini life support system, and that's allowing the cells to flourish while they hook it up to whatever experiment they're running at the time. Neural networks fire electrical currents, and what we see and feel with our senses is converted into electrical inputs in our brains, for example. So they've done the same thing here, just kind of in an artificial way, and they've made it so that the electrical stimulus of a demon on the screen is compelling the brain cells to shoot the dang thing. I'm sure it's far from a one-to-one comparison at this point, but it's pretty clever and fascinating what they've worked out. You may be wondering, where the company got these brain cells? And that's a really legitimate question, I feel like, these days in biotech, because of ethics and such. I was kind of worried that they just, went dumpster diving and found some brain stuff. You crank open the lid and you find some neurons? Or maybe they got them from somebody's water glass, like in the spy movies, how they get fingerprints. It's the same thing, right? That's how that works. You drink out of a glass, I got your brain. Ha ha ha. So the even crazier truth is that the brain cells belong to the CEO of Cortical Labs. Sort of. Because they used a process invented by a Nobel laureate in 2012 to extract white blood cells from him, and then revert them back into stem cells, and then induce them to become brain cells, and then, microwaved them up or whatever. The very first thing that Cortical Labs made headlines with in 2022 was when they first invented this thing, and then they got it to play Pong over the course of 18 months. Of course, immediately everyone wanted to see it do more than that, so that's what they started working on next. And now they're actually giving it away to everybody to have a chance to work on it themselves if they want. You can buy your own Cortical Labs CL1 right now and do your own experiments with it. All you need to do to get your hands on one of these fancy things is just part with a paltry $35,000. What is that? That's nothing. I remember when cars used to cost $35,000. Now the only thing you can get for that is a brain on a plate. But don't despair if you still want to play around with this stuff and you can't afford the price tag, because there's a cloud subscription too. There's also a GitHub link where you can download the documentation and get the API and totally go crazy. The whole argument behind this entire thing is that cloud computing, and specifically hardware engineering, has classically just been going about things completely backwards. At least that's the argument that Cortical Labs is making. Instead of trying to mimic human intelligence and even consciousness using silicon chips and artificial intelligence and hardware, what they're trying to do is build new kinds of computers using existing pathways to intelligence, which in this case means biological matter, and specifically neurons. If you just put a whole bunch of brain cells on a plate, voila, you have a computer. You don't need to manufacture anything artificial at all. And this is another one of those moments where we start to see science fiction slowly meld into science fact. There have been a few prominent instances of this kind of thing in science fiction, and the one that I'm thinking of off the top of my head is in the Star Wars expanded universe before they did the new sequel trilogy. There was an invasion from another galaxy by this alien race called the Yuzan Vong, and everything they used was some kind of living technology. It was all grown, not made. and it was all symbiotic and selected for specific traits and purposes. There were living ships with the Yuzhan Vong. There were also living ships in one of the expansions of the video game No Man's Sky that I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly, you could hatch from an egg. Am I remembering that right? That sounds bonkers. The thing about living technology that I immediately think about is, I guess, sort of an ethical question. And not in the sense that there's anything inherently sacred or spiritual or whatnot about biology, but in the sense that I'm worried that someday we're going to find out way too late that a bunch of neurons living in a petri dish that are all alive and firing together is just a little more aware of what's happening to them than we think. And like, this idea absolutely terrifies me. We've adapted our attitudes toward other living things around us in the world as we've gone along, right? Like, there were long stretches in the modern world where animal rights protesters didn't really make a lot of ground with the public sentiment. And we still have pretty awful factory farming conditions that you don't really ever want to see if you ever want to eat food again. There's a lot of research about how plant life registers harmful stimulus response, and for a good long time, people dismissed that was even a thing. It's not remotely the same, and they don't really have a nervous system, or they don't have a consciousness, and they don't feel pain, but they do respond to their environment through chemical signals. Like the scent of fresh cut grass, for example, is a message sent out into the world that help is required. The blades are out, and Gondor calls for aid. So yeah, I don't know the answer to any of this, but the uncomfortable truth is that we can't know yet. We don't have the technology to understand what the experience of grass might be, but we do have neurons, and I'm just thinking about those 200,000 or so that are sitting in a box and learning to play video games, only to die just 6 months later, because that's as long as the device is designed to last. $35,000 for 6 months of some random guy's brain matter. What a steal. Where's Billy Mays when you need him? But wait, there's more. A separate company has done another weird biotech thing with consciousness and possibly living neural networks that's also straight out of science fiction. Eon Systems in San Francisco successfully mapped the brain of a fruit fly and recreated its neural network with the fly's 140,000 neurons inside a virtual environment. In other words, they put a fly into the matrix. Their matrix is a very low resolution world and doesn't have a lot of complex interactions other than to tell the Neo fly if something around it is sweet or if it's food and other very simple stimuli. But they said that the virtual fly started acting like a real fly right off the bat. This, to me, is astounding, because it says something about the nature of behavior and consciousness. It also suggests, as Eon Systems points out, that our understanding of training AI is not correct. ChatGPT and others are constantly stealing intellectual property to train on datasets so they can mimic and recreate the things that they're studying. No one trained the virtual neurons in this fake fly to do anything, and the behavior simply seems to be just an aspect of the fly's neural network. We have a long way to go, I feel, to understanding this. Also, of course, this just completely terrifies the crap out of me in a lot of ways, and one could easily make the very short leap that if humans have put a brain of a fly inside the Matrix, then who's to say that someone hasn't built a simulation that we're all living in right now? Of course, this is a very popular thing to talk about, and it's a fascinating possibility, and one that I'm happy to nerd out about. But it's not like we have any way to actually know any of this for sure. Right now, I'm going to dive into the reasons why Pong and Doom are the chosen litmus tests for biological intelligence. This all came up a few days ago when I was out at the diner and talking to my lady friend about how I'd just gone through 3 generations of super strong martial rulers in my Crusader Kings 3 playthrough, and all of a sudden, my last king just up and died of overwhelming stress, and I was suddenly a chunky little girl. All alone in a cruel world, all alone with my sweet rolls.
Let me guess, someone stole your sweet roll. Lucky for you, I found it. Here you go.
My wife just brought up how amazed she was at all the layers of programming that go into the games like Crusader Kings. Like all these empires made up of individuals who all have active lives and stories, with or without your input. It's really quite astounding. And all this talk about artificial intelligence has more than just a passing connection to video games. Gamers have for many, many years used the term AI when referring to the computer. You used to play against the computer. But somewhere along the line that changed, and now you take a look at any game review from the last 20 years at least, and you'll see a very detailed analysis of the AI that you're playing against. Is the AI a bit dumb? Is the AI a little glitchy? Is the AI unforgiving? Does the AI do unexpected things which allow you to cheese it when it should be more of a challenge? Casual discussions about artificial intelligence have been a thing in the gaming world for a very long time, way before ChatGPT was even a glimmer in Sam Altman's eye. And actually, the first video game AI was created 20 years before Pong for the game Nim in 1941. And artificial intelligence networks were being made for video games for a very, very, very long time. Enemy AI, NPCs, environments, and basically anything you encounter in a game that you interact with could have decision trees or maybe weighted nodes that create input, output, causes, and effects. And those can trigger and change the permutations of whatever outcome is about to materialize for you, all based on your interactions. And a lot of the time with games these days, these things take place even without anything that you do. But what's different about video game AI is that it's based on a set of mathematical principles that are designed to make decisions easier, but not really to expand the possible decisions or create a sense of learning in the NPCs. The world, and the other non-player characters in it, are still restricted to a certain set of programmed behaviors. Games use mathematical concepts to create the perception of intelligence. Something called heuristic algorithms make what appear to be complex decisions and potentialities much simpler to design for. Decision trees, for example, can become much larger and more nuanced than those you'd find in early games. But game designers are still limited by processing power, and heuristic algorithms can only be so complicated, which leads to a lot of really predictable behavior or outright comical scenarios that were completely unintended sometimes. Just like when you're playing the grand strategy game Civilization and Gandhi unlocks nuclear weapons and then he always immediately drops them on you. And supposedly in earlier games in the series, this was just a fun little quirk of the limited decision tree and technology capacity, but then also supposedly we all found it so funny that they just hard-coded that into Gandhi's personality for every new game. Even though the options for making video game AI are way more robust now, we can't let go of wartime Gandhi's nuclear rage. Which is totally fine with me. It's hysterical. One of the other situations I came across while doing the research for this is that in the game Half-Life, the NPCs will crouch in place when you throw a grenade at them as if they're trying to kind of cover up and brace themselves. But the reason that the designers made them do this is that they couldn't figure out how to code the enemy AI to successfully run away from the grenade. They would just all like bunch up and run into each other and run into walls, and it just looks so doofy. So they just cut it and made them do something else. So some of the behaviors and things you see in video games are just a factor of the limitations of our current algorithms for NPC decision trees. Like, yeah, the decision is to run away, but like, that does more harm than good. So what we're looking at when these new companies sprouted up to take on designing an intelligence from a new perspective, a reverse perspective, is that this is a real neural network taken right out of the brains of real organisms, including us. If our brains work, and they do at least some of the time for a lot of us, then ripping off the mechanisms that make it work and just mashing that together with robot stuff is how you get the future. It's also how you get the Borg, but you know, you gotta be assimilated sometime. Listen, who knows if this whole thing is even going anywhere? Tons of tech companies have lived and died in the time it just took me to get out of the shower. This is another fun and sensational kind of step, but how many steps will there be in this direction before it either completely falls apart or runs out of funding, or just hits a wall of the physical world that wasn't anticipated? The whole thing seems futuristic enough to me that it feels like we wouldn't have the technology at this point to really be able to see it through. Considering the human brain has somewhere between 61 and 99 billion neurons inside of it, and we're talking about a device that has just 200,000. I mean, that definitely says that they aren't getting anywhere close to a real human intelligence anytime soon. And really, that's no different than the current AI large language models and chatbots. But yeah, it's a fun thought to think through, and fun to see how far we've come from Pong and whatever Nim was back in 1941. Maybe sometime in my lifetime, I could have my own walking, talking toaster. Everything is smart these days, and everything is AI now. So I imagine there's going to be a time when everything is biologically intelligent with artificial neural networks. And my toaster and I will have to argue about its pre-ontological being and quote Heidegger to me before the damn thing will make me some hot bread. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the video and to the channel. I do think it's important to do these explorations into recent human developments in technology and society so that we can figure out what these things mean for furthering or separating our humanity from that society. The society that we all happen to have to live in together. Instead of letting the technology just totally overwhelm and dictate our behaviors and development, we should get a head start on each new thing so we can incorporate it analytically and intentionally and not just get taken for a ride. And don't you get taken for a ride. At least not unless I'm driving. Man, my shirt is really wrinkly unless I'm stretching it out. And then you can see my nipples. Just straight up nipplage. Try to fake all that hotness, AI. I dare ya.